Hello, bonjour. My perspective on poverty has some privileges and some problems just because of my particular situation. Poverty strikes people of all races, disabled, abled. No matter who you are or where you come from, you can be affected by poverty. I want to kind of unpack some of the things that I think are beneficial for my point of view, for my perspective, as well as some of the things that maybe get in my way of providing the most helpful and important information. I know that many poor and disabled people are kept so busy struggling to survive and take care of themselves that they don't have the time or the energy to complain. This is unfortunately a time-tested way that keeps oppressed people oppressed and keeps people unaware of it because they don't have time to complain, or if you don't have access to the people that you would need to complain to, or if those people have the capacity to just not hear them, to avoid contact with the people who are in the most pain, then it can be easy to believe that there is no problem. I have had access to a lot of books and a lot of materials for self-education and other educational resources. I've prioritized that because it makes me feel better. So I have words and understanding to help me express myself that might not have been available to other poor people, other disabled people from different circumstances than mine, because I started out middle class and now I'm poor. I have internet access, I have internet platforms, I have the knowledge to use them and speak out. These are all privileges that I have. I've also had the privilege to have access to events and people and places that many poor and disabled people might not have or even know about. Not having always been this poor gives me something to compare it to, and familiarity with the ways that many people have it better off than others. This privilege also presents some problems with my perspective, in that I didn't earn the middle class privilege I was born into. And I can feel a lot of anger and shame about losing those privileges. There's a great article that I'm going to link to in the description box called The Distress of the Privileged. A lot of people with privilege, when faced with the loss of that privilege, can feel like their pain is oppression, like they are being oppressed. This is also where we get the term reverse racism, and I'm going to link to the most important video you will ever hear about why reverse racism is not a thing. The article references one of my favorite movies, Pleasantville, which takes place in this idealized Leave It to Beaver-esque 1950s black and white TV show. And the father figure, the breadwinner, he always comes home, he says, "Honey, I'm home," and the little wife kisses him and gives him a martini and has dinner on the table. And then one day, because things are changing in Pleasantville, he comes home and this isn't the case, and he's very distressed. But the point of the article is that the distress of the privileged, it can feel really real to them, especially if they've never had to experience what it's like to not have these things. I've lost things that I had. I have lost privileges that I had. And I'm fully aware that the feelings that I feel about losing these things that I didn't necessarily earn to begin with may be this spoiled whininess. It doesn't mean that none of my complaints are valid. And just because other people have it worse doesn't mean that I shouldn't talk about these problems. I think it's very important to use the privileges that I do have to draw attention to these problems, while still not claiming that I have it the worst. This isn't the Oppression Olympics, which is the Olympics that everyone loses, and the only way to win is not to play. I had a lot of shame growing up because I was materially spoiled, and so I felt like I didn't have a right to complain about anything. What I didn't realize at the time was that you can be spoiled and also abused and neglected at the same time. And in fact, a lot of times abusers will give their victims, their targets, gifts, extravagant gifts, to try to make up for or negate the consequences of the abuse that they've enacted. So, like, well, here I gave you this thing, so why are you still complaining about it? I definitely feel a lot of insecurity, both in that I can appear middle class, but I'm not, but also that I am really, really poor, but I don't look poor, and I still have privileges that other poor people may not, especially if they were born poor, and that they might look to me with the same resentment that sometimes I feel toward people who have things that I don't. This is a feeling, and it's human. It's a normal human kind of feeling. If you're hurting a lot and you see somebody else who isn't struggling with the same things, to feel like, hey, that's not fair. And it's not. And it's not going to be more fair if I shut up about it. I'm not going to let it silence me that others have it worse. I'm going to use the privileges that I have to point out for every voice that poor people have, like mine, many more are silenced by lack of energy, lack of time, internet, audience, access, and all of the resources that they would need to be able to reach you and share their story. I'm going to use my privilege to raise awareness instead of presuming to speak for poverty. It's not a monolith. Everyone can be affected by poverty regardless of anything, and it can intersect with other forms of oppression. I'm impoverished and I'm also disabled and I'm female, so it's intersectional. And you can also be more wealthy than me, but also oppressed in other ways. Intersectionality is really important for that very reason. Realizing that you can be both spoiled and abused is important, and realizing you can be both privileged and oppressed is important. The two do not cancel each other out. Sometimes I feel like there's really not much left for me to lose, whether or not that's true. Because it's a feeling, though, it helps me to overcome the fear and shame that might otherwise stop me from speaking out, and I hope it will also embolden me against any silencings that I may encounter, internal or external. Time to break the silence. Thank you for watching.